Imagine a scene of utter chaos. Hordes of people, surging and battling, a swirling mass of limbs and mud. This wasn't war, but a game. A game called football. But this was no ordinary pastime. This was medieval football, a brutal, unorganized free-for-all where entire villages clashed, often resulting in serious injury, even death. No referees, few rules, and a single, often crudely made ball. These were the ingredients for a spectacle that both thrilled and terrified medieval England. For centuries, this visceral display of communal energy was a staple of rural life, a release valve, a tradition fiercely defended. But this unruly game also ignited fear and condemnation. Kings and nobles saw it as a threat to social order, a dangerous distraction from work and military training, a breeding ground for unrest and violence. Across 3 centuries, from the 14th to the 17th, the English monarchy repeatedly tried to ban it, a testament to the game's disruptive power. But why such vehement opposition? What forces were at play that led to the outlawing of England's most popular, if most violent, sport? In this documentary, we will delve into the heart of medieval mayhem, uncovering the surprising reasons behind the centuries-long ban on football. We'll explore the game's origins, its rules, or lack thereof, and the social fabric it both reinforced and threatened. We'll examine the economic pressures, the political anxieties, and the religious objections that fueled the royal decrees. From the fields of rural England to the courts of its kings, we'll unravel the complex story of a game that was both beloved and outlawed, a game that ultimately shaped the very fabric of English society. Get ready to explore the brutal origins, the social upheaval, and the enduring legacy of medieval mayhem. Medieval mayhem, imagine a sport unlike any you've ever witnessed. Forget manicured pitches, strict rules, and celebrity endorsements. This is medieval football, a chaotic melee where entire villages clashed in a brutal, often lawless spectacle. Fields weren't neatly marked. They were sprawling landscapes, sometimes stretching for miles. The goal? Often a designated church or town square. The ball itself? Anything from an inflated pig's bladder to a rock. Anything, really. Picture hundreds, even thousands, converging in a mass of pushing, shoving humanity. Broken bones, gouged eyes, and even deaths weren't uncommon. This wasn't a game of finesse. It was a raw, visceral contest of strength and endurance. Welcome to a world where football was less a sport and more a controlled riot, a tradition as deeply embedded in the English countryside as the ancient oaks that witnessed the mayhem. Our journey begins here at the very edge of what we recognize as the beautiful game. But beneath the surface of brute force lay a deeper meaning. Medieval football wasn't merely a violent pastime. It was a vital social ritual. These annual matches, often tied to Shrovetide or other seasonal celebrations, provided a rare opportunity for community bonding. It was a chance for villagers to come together, regardless of their social standing, and participate in a shared experience. While the game might seem anarchic, it also reinforced existing social hierarchies. The local lord might have offered encouragement or even participated, showcasing his strength and solidifying his position. And for the lower classes, football offered a temporary release from the daily grind, an outlet for aggression in a society often defined by hardship and constraint. It was a fleeting moment of empowerment, a brief escape into a world of controlled, albeit brutal, chaos. However, this communal spirit came at a price. Medieval football was notoriously destructive. Imagine entire fields of crops trampled underfoot, fences torn down, and property damaged in the relentless pursuit of the ball. The disruption extended far beyond the immediate playing field. Work ground to a halt as entire communities downed tools to participate or simply spectate. Local markets suffered as trade was abandoned in favor of the game. Agricultural production, already vulnerable to the whims of the weather, was further impacted by the widespread destruction. For the local economy, these events were more than just an inconvenience. They represented a significant drain on resources and a threat to livelihood. It wasn't just broken bones, it was broken livelihoods. Beyond the economic consequences, medieval football presented a direct challenge to the established legal and social order. The games, by their very nature, were difficult to control. Local authorities struggled to maintain order in the face of such large, unruly crowds. The inherent lawlessness of the game, the lack of rules, the widespread violence, fostered an atmosphere of defiance. It was a breeding ground for petty crime and potentially more serious unrest. Imagine a sheriff attempting to quell a riotous crowd, only to be swept away in the tide of humanity. The games undermined the authority of local officials and highlighted the limitations of their power. In a society where order was paramount, football represented a significant threat to stability. The concerns about social order and military preparedness finally reached the ears of King Edward II. In 1314, he issued a proclamation, a formal ban on football, the first recorded attempt to suppress the game. Edward, acutely aware of the political instability of his reign, saw football as a dangerous distraction. The unruly gatherings, the potential for violence, and the challenge to royal authority were simply unacceptable. The decree stated, in no uncertain terms, that football was to be discontinued. But this wasn't merely about quelling riots. Edward also worried about the impact on military training. The constant injuries sustained during football matches left men unfit for service, weakening the kingdom's defenses. The ban was a direct response to the perceived threat that football posed to Edward's rule and the security of England. The heart of England's military strength lay in its archers. The longbow, wielded with deadly accuracy, had proven decisive in battles like Crecy and Agincourt. But mastery of the longbow required constant practice, countless hours spent honing skill and precision. Football, with its allure of immediate gratification and visceral excitement, was seen as a dangerous distraction. Young men, instead of dedicating themselves to archery practice, were drawn to the muddy fields and the chaotic thrill of the game. Royal decrees mandated archery practice on Sundays, but the irresistible pull of football often proved too strong. The fear was clear. A nation obsessed with football would become a nation vulnerable to invasion. Every hour spent chasing a pig's bladder was an hour lost perfecting the art of warfare. The ban initiated by Edward II wasn't a one-off edict. It was a precedent. Successive monarchs, particularly during the Tudor period, recognized the perceived threat posed by football and actively reinforced the prohibition. Henry VIII, with his obsession with control and military strength, saw football as an impediment to discipline and order. Elizabeth I, facing numerous internal and external threats, similarly viewed the game with suspicion. Their administrations enacted laws aimed at suppressing dissent and promoting obedience. Football, with its potential for unrest and its distraction from more useful pursuits, was a clear target. The Tudor monarchs understood that a well-disciplined and obedient populace was essential for maintaining power, and football simply didn't fit into that equation. The game was anathema to their vision of a strong and unified England. But the opposition to football wasn't solely driven by political or military concerns. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the rising Puritan movement added a new dimension to the debate. The Puritans, with their strict moral code, condemned football as a sinful and immoral activity. They saw it as a breeding ground for gambling, drunkenness, and Sabbath breaking. The boisterous crowds, the lack of restraint, and the often violent nature of the game were all seen as affronts to God. For the Puritans, the Sabbath was a day for prayer and reflection, not for rowdy games and reckless abandon. Their sermons railed against the ungodly nature of football, urging their congregations to abstain from such worldly pleasures. Their moral arguments further fueled the efforts to suppress the game, adding a powerful religious dimension to the existing opposition. Despite the decrees from London, despite the king's pronouncements, football, in its raw, unbridled form, refused to die. The ban, while officially enforced, proved notoriously difficult to implement across the vast expanse of England. In rural villages and bustling market towns, the spirit of the game flickered like embers in the night. Each region clung to its own unique interpretation. In Cornwall, hurling was played across entire parishes, a chaotic scrum that could last for hours. In East Anglia, the game often involved kicking a bladder through the streets, using houses as makeshift goals. These weren't codified rule sets. These were living traditions, passed down through generations, stubbornly resistant to the dictates of the crown. Villagers saw it as their right, a custom woven into the fabric of their communities. The bans were largely ignored, especially in remote areas where the king's authority held less sway. The beautiful, messy, anarchic game continued to breathe, a testament to its profound connection to the English soul. By the 18th century, the most violent incarnations of medieval football began to wane. Not because of the bans, those were still sporadically enforced, but due to changing social conditions. Urbanization drew people away from rural traditions, and the rise of industrialization demanded more structured leisure activities. Yet the primal urge to compete, to test oneself physically, didn't disappear. The seeds of modern football were sown within the hallowed halls of England's elite public schools. Places like Eton, Rugby, and Harrow began experimenting with their own versions of the game. These schools introduced rules, structure, and a sense of fair play, a stark contrast to the free-for-all of the past. The Cambridge Rules of 1848 marked a crucial step, attempting to unify the disparate school codes. This marked a turning point, the transition from a brutal folk custom to a codified sport, laying the groundwork for the Football Association and the birth of modern football as we know it. While the formal rules of modern football tame the raw chaos of its medieval ancestor, a certain untamed spirit persists. The fierce tackles, the competitive edge, the unwavering dedication. These are echoes of the game played centuries ago. Look at the intensity in a modern derby match, the passion of the fans, the win-at-all-cost mentality. One might argue that the sanitized version on television is a far cry from the bone-crunching medieval game, but the underlying human drive remains. The need to dominate, to conquer, to prove oneself, is a thread that connects us to those who battle for a pig's bladder in a muddy field. Though the consequences are rarely life-threatening now, the primal instincts, however sublimated, endure. Medieval football may be gone, but its legacy, its rebellious energy, can still be felt on the pitch today, a reminder that even the most civilized games have roots in something wilder. From bloody brawls between villages to the stern decrees of kings, we've journeyed through the tumultuous history of medieval football. The reasons for its centuries-long ban are multifaceted. The economic disruption it caused, drawing laborers away from essential work. The threat it posed to social order, a breeding ground for potential rebellion. And the moral panic it stoked, viewed as a barbaric and ungodly spectacle. Yet, despite the bans, the spirit of the game persisted, flickering beneath the surface of English society, a testament to its deep-rooted appeal. Medieval football, in its raw and untamed form, may be long gone, but its DNA can be found in the modern sports we celebrate today. The emphasis on teamwork, the communal passion, the sheer physicality, all echo the spirit of those chaotic medieval matches. The struggle to control and codify the game also reveals a broader narrative about the tension between individual freedom and social order, a tension that continues to shape our world. Ultimately, the story of England's ban on football is more than just a historical curiosity. It's a window into a society grappling with profound social, economic, and political changes. It's a reminder that even the simplest games can reflect the deepest anxieties and aspirations of a nation. And it begs the question, what seemingly innocuous activities today will future generations look back on and wonder, why were they so obsessed or so afraid?